Robin Hood Radio presents Flavor Matters with Serge Madikians. He's the owner of Servan Restaurant in Armenia. If you can't find him in the kitchen or gardens, then follow him either on Facebook or Twitter at ServanNY.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for tuning in to Flavor Matters. This is Serge from Servan Restaurant, continuing my series on Armenians and Armenia. And I am thrilled to have an artist, Armenian female artist by name of Nelly Achkhen, who is joining me from California. Good morning, Nelly.
Good morning, Serge. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for coming on board and helping me with this series. You're an Armenian born and raised in Lebanon, and you have lived on the East Coast, and now you live on the West Coast in California, in Los Angeles specifically. And your parents and grandparents are the survivors, your grandparents are the survivors of the Armenian genocide who relocated to Lebanon where you were born. Would you take us back to Lebanon in the early 70s when you were born and tell us a little bit about your household and how you grew up? It sounds very fascinating with the both European, Armenian, and especially American influences with which you grew up.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me, Serge, on this. Well, growing up in Lebanon was very interesting because you grow up first thing, 3 years, you're a 3 years old, child. They send you to school and you are exposed for 4 different languages. You have Armenian, Arabic, your first mother tongues, and then you have French and English added on top. So you're born as an international in that little country. So that said, you wake up with that kind of sense of belonging to the world without knowing what these 4 languages later, these treasures, they can serve you.
What an interesting point that you just raised, that you don't know how these languages will in the future serve you, and you
absolutely
you grow up in a worldly household without your knowing.
Absolutely. Both my parents, they had an interesting upbringing. My father lost both his parents due to the genocide, difficulties as a family. And my mother, who was born in Damascus, Syria, later on as a teenage, was sent to Cyprus to join the Melkonian school. And then they both left their household pretty early. So I feel that I have a little bit of a similar trait with both of them. They each went they followed their education. My dad ended up getting his education through correspondence, which doesn't exist anymore. So everything is online. Right. But even back then, he had to finish his last year in Los Angeles to acquire his electronic degree at a technical
engineering, right?
Yeah, yep. And then my mother, after finishing school at Melkonian, got a full scholarship to finish her nursing degree at American University in Beirut. And both of them were at pretty early stages. They were exposed to the American culture, and immediately that kind of translates in our family. You're in a family with, they're both exposed to American culture, meaning, they know everything that runs into this American society, which is the breakfast, the food, the celebrations, the Thanksgiving, and all of that.
That's right.
In the middle of a Middle East back in the 80s, that nobody knew anything about donuts.
That's right. And you told me that your favorite cookbook was the Betty Crocker cookbook, from which you
Yeah.
guys made your donuts.
Yeah, actually, it's one of my favorite cookbooks. It was pretty thick, and it had a red cover and the most fascinating cover pages of each menus. Beautiful photos. Rare to see a cookbook that was beautifully designed back in the 80s.
Like The Joy of Cooking, it's
Yeah.
probably one of the most reliable cookbooks as far as the recipes are concerned, because it's been edited there's so many versions and so many edits they have.
Yeah.
So when you were young and you were growing up with your sister and brother and your family, and you're speaking both dialects of Arabic, you are going to the French school, your brother is going to the American school, and you are living a pretty normal life, and you decide that you like news and television, and you study. Tell us about what you study.
That's part of it comes from my father, because he owned, to better describe it, a small Best Buy shop in the middle of Burchamud, which is an Armenian famous town, and that kind of whole fascination of technology.
Could you tell us about that neighborhood one more time, please?
Yeah, Burchamud is a city in Beirut that has a lot of concentrated Armenian population after the genocide. Moving around the Middle East, that was an area where a lot of Armenians came and became traders. I mean, by heart, by nature, we're traders. So we found that, we kind of constructed that city to become our most mundane, daily, everyday. You say Burchamut, it's Armenians running the whole town.
And it's right by the Mediterranean shores, and
Yep.
many different Armenians from different villages of Anatolia, they settled there, and with settling there, they brought the craft or the trade that they knew or they undertook in Anatolia, they continued it in Lebanon.
Yes, it's a very authentic place. If you wanted to explore something in Lebanon, it's definitely an interesting spot. You can walk along, a good seven kilometers, or like not kilometers, perhaps maybe 16 miles, some sort of enjoy a stroll and discover it and get lost in it, because it has a lot of deep small streets that lead you to nowhere, or to another street that leads you to another street. It's a labyrinth in its own by design. My father owned a shop there for a good 35 years. Growing up as a child, you follow your dad footsteps, your father's footsteps. You get influenced by what the craft is, his craft, the electronics and technology and the advancement. He was very savvy in showing us the latest headphones, or the latest CD players when it came in later, the Blu-rays and the camcorders. It was very exciting because it was
So
new.
he was like my father. He was a technology geek.
Yeah,
And
he was a DJ.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he used to release. Well, back then, when still with LPs, he used to release the top 10 charts in Lebanon. So it was very exciting.
He was a DJ at a radio station.
He was just released the top 10 of the week, not necessarily like do a vocal or just it was his top 10 that they would release it. And he would have all the LPs, and we had a collection of a lot of LPs.
So he was also a very artistic, musically inclined person.
Yeah, he brought a lot of that visual, audio, visual, to our family. Like we were all connected with his cameras. He always had a camera in his hand. And his salesmanship was very interesting to watch it in the shop, how he sold it to, housewives. Because it's most of the time his clients are, the women buying kitchen tools and, mixers, things like that. So I was
Give us an
pretty much.
example of what stands out in your mind about his selling skills.
I'll tell you because I embrace it myself. He actually has this way of not convincing, but explaining why you need this particular product versus the other one. So he goes by eliminating. He asked interesting, smart questions to know what your purpose of using this element or this new thing you're trying to buy. And electronics usually are not cheap. They're always expensive, especially if they're trending. So he really cares to sell the right piece for you instead of just selling for the sake of profit. So he really asks always the questions, like for instance, if he wanted to sell a Presto, like a pressure cooker, he would ask, how many families in the house, how many times you have parties in a month, things like that. So he was very engaged in that kind of figuring out what's the best thing to
So he
sell.
really cared about the individual rather than the sale.
Yeah, he loved the stories.
Yeah, that makes it much more of an interesting way. Nelly, we have just a couple minutes left. So you were educated and you become 22 years old, and about 23, you have this opportunity to move to the U.S. Mm-hmm. In just a couple minutes that we have left, mm-hmm. could you convey to me and to our listeners the joy, the excitement, the fear, the anxiety that you felt about that move?
It's it's a fast question, but it's a lot to talk about there. First of all, just to say, I never realized that, again, like we opened this morning conversation, Arabic as a language is going to come in handy in my, transition to the 20s and so forth. I think the minute we got a call from the embassy, the U.S. embassy, that the visa was approved, it was just a moment of exhilarating moment, because you never know. Everything is unknown. It's parts unknown, and it's open for discovery. And I feel very lucky to have that moment to experience that moment, because suddenly you feel like you're elevated. You're about to take this, a flight, but you don't know, where it's going to land, how it's going to land. And that feeling to feel above the world or above everybody is very unique in its own sense, because you don't have that kind of feelings in your everyday life. Not every day something special like that happens. And I was lucky that my Arabic came to my rescue. As an Arabic designer, I was hired as an Arabic designer to work in a TV station that was about to launch. The launch date was set on Valentine's Day. So that whole excitement of moving to the U.S. and starting a new life, putting aside the idea of career, because I'm only 22, I have no idea what a career is, but starting a new life was very important for me, especially coming.
And I bet very exhilarating, because you're in Lebanon and mm-hmm. I was in Iran, And the perception of the U.S. from outside of U.S. is very different than when you arrive into the U.S. And I know that I was very exhilarated, even though it was a very difficult time for us. I would love to continue this conversation. We're coming to an end of this segment. If you don't mind sticking around so we can continue the conversation. I've had the pleasure of speaking to Nelly Achkhen, who is an artist, a female artist living in Los Angeles, an Armenian from Lebanon. I hope that you will tune in to our next segment. This is Serge from Servan Restaurant and Flavor Matters. Thank you.
Flavor Matters is a joint production of the Servan Restaurant and Robin Hood Radio. For more information on the Servan Restaurant in Armenia, New York, servan.com on the web.